The courtroom held its breath as a wealthy businessman smirked in the face of justice, refusing to stand, mocking the victims he had ruined. But he had no idea the quiet judge before him wasn't just here to listen. She was about to bring his empire crashing down, one sentence at a time. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The courtroom was full before the trial even began. Every seat was taken. People stood at the back, pressed shoulder to shoulder. They whispered to each other, eyes flicking toward the door. They were not here out of curiosity. They were here because they had been hurt. They had lost homes, savings, futures. And the man responsible was about to walk in. Then the door opened. Keon Raver stepped inside like he owned the building. He was tall, broad, and dressed in a silver-gray suit that looked like it cost more than most people made in a year. His shoes shined. His dark hair was slicked back. He didn't look worried. He looked amused. He walked slowly down the aisle, toward the defendant's table. People stared. Some gasped. Others muttered under their breath. But Keon just smiled, as if the courtroom was his stage and the audience had come to watch his performance. He sat down, leaned back, and opened a leather folder. His lawyer, a short man with round glasses, leaned in to whisper something. Keon didn't even glance at him. He waved him off and kept flipping through pages, pretending to read. The air felt heavy. Then the bailiff stepped forward. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Nalia Thorne," he said. Everyone stood. Even the people in the back rose quietly with respect. Everyone except Keon Raver. He stayed seated, still flipping through his papers, his lips curved into a small smirk. The room went silent. All eyes turned toward him. His lawyer leaned in again, this time urgently. Keon didn't move. He tapped the edge of his pen against the folder and looked toward the judge's bench with complete disinterest. Judge Nalia entered from a side door, wearing her long black robe. She moved with calm confidence, her steps slow but steady. She didn't look angry. She didn't speak right away. She took her seat at the bench, adjusted her papers, and only then did she look up. Her eyes landed on Keon. He finally looked up too, meeting her gaze. For a moment, no one breathed. "You may be seated," Judge Nalia said softly. The rest of the courtroom sat down. Keon remained as he was, relaxed and smug. Judge Nalia said nothing more. She looked down and opened a folder. The silence stretched. In the back row, an older woman named Rosa Fern wiped her eyes. Her hands trembled. She had lost her home after trusting Keon's company with her savings. Beside her sat Malcolm Trace, a retired bus driver who now lived in a friend's basement. Their eyes didn't leave Keon. He didn't seem to notice them. The bailiff called the case. The charges were serious: financial fraud, theft, obstruction. But to Keon, it sounded like background noise. The judge looked up again. "We begin opening statements today," she said, her voice calm and clear. "I ask all parties to remain respectful. The court is a place of order." Keon leaned back, in his chair, crossing one leg over the other. He didn't nod. He didn't blink. His whole posture said one thing: "This doesn't matter to me." His lawyer stood to speak, offering a carefully rehearsed introduction about misunderstandings and misplaced trust. The courtroom listened politely, though many faces showed doubt. Then the prosecutor stood. "What you will hear in this courtroom," she said, "is not just numbers and papers. You will hear from real people, people who believed in something and were crushed by greed." Keon rolled his eyes. Someone in the gallery whispered, "He still thinks he'll win." But the judge said nothing. As the morning continued, documents were introduced. Photos of families who had lost their homes were shown on a large screen. Keon didn't look up. He glanced at his phone, checking something, and then slid it back into his pocket. Rosa Fern looked at the photo of her own house. Now, empty, abandoned. Tears welled in her eyes again, but she stayed quiet. Judge Nalia's expression didn't change. She watched everything, listened to everyone, but it was clear she was watching Keon the most. He was the kind of man used to getting his way. He believed Money could solve everything. His company, Raver Trust, had promised big returns to everyday people. Families invested everything. But behind the promises were lies, and now finally the truth was being unwrapped in public. But Keon was not afraid. As the court adjourned for lunch, he stood and stretched like he had just finished a long, boring meeting. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited. Inside, Judge Nalia remained at her bench for a moment longer, her hands folded in front of her. She watched Keon leave the room. She didn't say anything, but everyone could feel it. This was not over, and Keon Raver was not as untouchable as he believed. The courtroom was quiet when Rosa Fern took the stand. She clutched a tissue in her hand, her fingers trembling slightly. Her clothes were simple, her voice soft, but her story carried a heavy weight. Judge Nalia watched her with calm eyes, nodding gently for her to begin. "I was a waitress," Rosa said. "I saved every dollar I could. I wanted my children to have a better life than I did. So when I heard about Raver Trust, I thought, this is it. This is my chance." She paused, swallowing hard. "I invested all of it," she continued. "My savings, my kids' college funds, everything. They told me it was safe. They promised I would see double in 5 years." Keon Raver, sitting at the defense table, leaned back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling. He didn't seem to hear her. 3 months later, Rosa said, "The company vanished. The money was gone, my rent was due, my kids had to leave school, we slept in our car for 2 weeks. Someone in the gallery gasped. Another person wiped their eyes. But Keon Raver remained still, his face calm and empty. The prosecutor nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Fern. You've shown great courage." Rosa stepped down and returned to her seat. Her eyes were red, but she stood tall. Next came Malcolm Trace. He was a man in his 60s with strong hands and a tired face. He had spent 35 years as a city bus driver. He walked slowly to the stand, nodding to Judge Nalia as he passed. "I'm not a rich man," Malcolm said. "Never was. But I saved. Every paycheck, every bonus. My wife and I dreamed of retiring by the sea." He stopped for a moment, looking down. "She passed away last year," he said, his voice shaking, "and right before that our retirement fund disappeared. All of it. I found out it went through Raver Trust." He looked at Keon. "You didn't just steal money," Malcolm said quietly. "You stole our dreams." Keon shifted slightly in his seat but said nothing. He whispered something to his lawyer, then smiled to himself. Judge Nalia's expression didn't change. Throughout the day, more people spoke. Some cried, some stayed calm. Others shouted in frustration, but they all told the same kind of story. Hope turned into pain, trust turned into loss. Then the prosecutor brought out the emails. On a large screen, one message appeared. "Make the numbers look good. We need these people to sign fast." Another line came next. "They're just small fish. No one will care if they sink." The room went silent. Keon looked up at the screen, then leaned back again. His smile returned. "Mr. Raver," the prosecutor said, turning toward him. "Do you recognize these emails?" Before he could answer, his lawyer jumped in. "Objection, Your Honor. This question was addressed in pre-trial." Judge Nalia raised one hand. "Overruled. The defendant will answer." Keon leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Yes, I recognize them," he said. "But let's not act like they mean something they don't. This is just how business works. You wouldn't understand." A wave of whispers filled the room. Judge Nalia's gavel struck the desk once. "Order in the court," she said, her voice steady. She turned to Keon, her eyes sharp. "Mr. Raver, I advise you to watch your tone. This is not a board meeting." Keon didn't reply. He stared at the judge with a calm, unreadable face. The next witness was a young man named Jalen Moore. He had been a teacher. He spoke about how he had trusted Keon's company to help build a school in a poor neighborhood. The money disappeared. The project was never finished. Children were left waiting for a school that would never open. "They still ask me why it was taken away," Jalen said, tears in his eyes. "I don't know how to answer them." Again, Keon showed no reaction. He tapped his fingers on the table, looked at the clock and whispered something to his lawyer, who didn't respond. The people in the courtroom watched, stunned by his coldness. The damage was real. The pain was deep. But Keon Raver acted like it didn't matter. Then something unusual happened. Judge Nalia leaned forward slightly. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "I would remind everyone in this room," she said, "that this court stands not only for law, but for truth. And truth is not something that can be bought, ignored, or mocked." The room was silent. Keon didn't smile this time. The trial continued, but the mood had shifted. People no longer whispered to each other. They sat in quiet support of the victims. Judge Nalia's presence seemed to grow stronger with each hour. As the day ended, the judge gave a short reminder. "We will resume tomorrow. I ask that all involved show respect. This courtroom is a place of justice." Keon stood and walked out without a word, but those left behind could feel it. Justice had begun to breathe. The courtroom was packed again on the third day. Reporters filled the back rows. Families of victims sat quietly, waiting for the truth to be spoken. Everyone was tired, but no one wanted to miss what was coming. Keon Raver sat at the defense table like he had before, relaxed and smiling. He wore a navy blue suit today, his tie perfect, his hair neat. He looked like a man going to a business meeting, not a man facing years in prison. But today things were different. The prosecutor stood and called for more evidence. A large screen lit up at the front of the room. Everyone leaned forward. One by one, emails and messages appeared. The words were sharp and cold. "Cut the losses. Sell them hope. Move on before they realize. Doesn't matter if it's real. We need them to believe it is. People are desperate. Use that." Every word hung in the air like smoke. The silence was heavy. "Mr. Raver," the prosecutor said, "did you write these messages?" Keon leaned toward the microphone. "I did," he said, "but you're twisting them. This is just business language. It doesn't mean I did anything wrong." The room remained silent. "Just business?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes," Keon said, shrugging. "You wouldn't understand how this world works." In the gallery, Rosa Fern closed her eyes. Malcolm Trace stared at the screen, his hands clenched. Judge Nalia looked at Keon. Her voice was calm. "Mr. Raver, this court does not exist to understand the world of the wealthy. It exists to understand the truth." Keon looked away. The next witness was a former employee of Raver Trust, a woman named Lena Call. She had worked in accounting. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "I was told to change numbers," Lena said. "I was told to hide the losses, move money around. When I asked questions, I was threatened." "By whom?" the prosecutor asked. "By Mr. Raver directly," she replied. "He said if I didn't do what he wanted, he'd destroy my career." Keon laughed softly, shaking his head. "Ridiculous," he muttered. Judge Nalia looked at him. "Mr. Raver, you will remain silent while others speak," she said. Keon raised his hands. "Just reacting, Judge." "Keep your reactions to yourself," she said, her voice sharp. "For the first time?" Lena continued, showing copies of reports and messages she had saved. They matched the evidence the prosecutor had shown earlier. The courtroom stayed silent, but the tension grew thicker. By afternoon, the gallery was full of people who had once trusted Keon. Some had invested thousands, others only hundreds. But the loss was still real. One woman whispered to her husband, "He thought no one would fight back." But someone was fighting back, and that someone was Judge Nalia Thorne. After a short break, the prosecutor brought Rosa Fern back to the stand. She held a folded piece of paper in her hand. She unfolded it slowly, her fingers shaking. "I wrote this the night we lost our home," she said. "I never meant to share it, but I think it matters now." She began to read. "Dear God, please help us. My kids are scared. I tell them everything will be okay, but I don't know if that's true. I believed in a man who promised hope. Now we have nothing. Please, if someone is out there, show him what he's done." Her voice cracked. She stopped. The courtroom was silent. Tears filled many eyes. Keon looked at her for a moment. Just a moment. Then he turned to his lawyer and whispered something. He smirked again. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "the defendant is not paying attention to the witness." Judge Nalia looked at Keon. Her eyes were colder than before. "Mr. Raver," she said, "put your phone away." Keon glanced up, annoyed. "I was checking something important." "Now," the judge said. He slowly placed the phone on the table. Rosa finished her letter and stepped down. People in the gallery quietly nodded to her as she passed. When the court took a break, the air outside the room felt different. People stood in small groups whispering not about evidence but about what it meant. "It's not just numbers," someone said. "It's people's lives." Inside her chambers, Judge Nalia sat alone for a moment. She stared at the wall, deep in thought. She had seen many trials before, but this one carried something extra. It carried the weight of silence finally being broken. When court resumed, Keon's lawyer stood up and began the defense. He tried to explain away the emails. He said the victims had misunderstood the risks. He said Keon was only guilty of being too ambitious. But no one in the room seemed to believe it. As the day ended, Judge Nalia made one final note. "We will begin closing arguments tomorrow," she said. "I remind all participants that respect and order must continue." Keon stood, slowly. His eyes scanned the room, but his usual smile was gone. Something had shifted. Justice had begun to breathe, and Keon Raver was starting to feel it. The final day of the trial arrived with gray clouds hanging low in the sky. Inside the courthouse, the mood was thick with quiet tension. No one spoke loudly. Even the reporters stood still, notebooks and cameras ready. Keon Raver entered the courtroom like he always had, confident and calm. He wore a dark suit and walked with the same swagger. But something in his eyes had changed. He didn't smile as easily. He didn't look around as much. He knew the end was near. Judge Nalia Thorne sat at the bench, her face calm, her eyes steady. She had listened to every story, watched every witness, and studied every word of evidence. Today, she would speak. The room was packed. Victims sat shoulder to shoulder, hands folded tightly in their laps. Rosa Fern clutched her purse against her chest. Malcolm Trace sat still, not blinking. Beside him, Jalen Moore held his breath. The court clerk stood. "All rise." Everyone stood. This time even Keon stood up. Judge Nalia nodded and took her seat. "You may be seated," she said. The courtroom sat down, silent as stone. Judge Nalia looked directly at Keon. "Mr. Raver," she began, "you have been found guilty on all charges of fraud, deception, and obstruction of justice. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and more powerful than the evidence were the voices of those you hurt." Keon's face was blank. He didn't move. "Throughout this trial," the judge continued, "you have shown no sign of regret. You laughed, you mocked, and you acted as if this courtroom was beneath you. You treated people's suffering as if it were a show." She paused for a moment. The silence in the room deepened. "Justice," she said, "is not something to be bought or delayed. It is not something that bends to wealth. It is the voice of fairness. And today, that voice will be heard." Keon sat up straighter. A flicker of worry crossed his face. "Therefore," Judge Nalia said, her voice strong and clear, "I sentence you to 27 years in federal prison. There will be no chance of parole." Gasps rose from the crowd. Keon's jaw dropped. His hands gripped the edge of the table. "What?" he said loudly. "You can't do that," the judge continued. "In addition, I am ordering the full liquidation of your assets. Every dollar will go toward repaying the victims of your crimes." "Rosa," Fern's hand flew to her mouth. Malcolm Trace leaned back, eyes wide. Tears streamed down the faces of many in the room. Keon jumped up. "You don't understand who I am," he shouted. "I'm not just anyone. I built everything I have. This is unfair." Judge Nalia didn't flinch. "You will sit down, Mr. Raver," she said, her voice steady. Keon shook his head. "You'll regret this. I'll appeal. I'll have your job taken away." The bailiffs moved closer. Remove the defendant from the courtroom, Judge Nalea ordered. As they approached him, Keon stepped back. This is a mistake. You're all making a mistake. But no one moved to stop the bailiffs. They took him by the arms and led him away. His voice faded as he was pulled out of the room. This isn't over, he shouted. I'm Keon Raver. And then he was gone. For a moment, the courtroom stayed silent. Then, slowly, applause began. It grew louder. The sound filled the room. It wasn't just for the sentence, it was for the truth. It was for every broken dream that had finally been seen. Judge Nalea raised her hand gently. The room quieted again. This court thanks all those who came forward, she said. Your strength made this possible. Outside, the sun peeked through the clouds. Reporters ran to deliver the news. Families hugged. Tears turned into smiles. People who had once felt powerless now felt something return. Hope. Rosa Fern stood on the courthouse steps. A reporter approached her. How do you feel, Mrs. Fern? She looked down for a second, then answered softly. I feel lighter. It won't bring back what we lost. But now at least we know the system didn't ignore us. Someone listened. Nearby, Malcolm Trace spoke to his son. It's not about the years, he said. It's about the message. No one is untouchable. Inside her chambers, Judge Nalea sat alone. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. Her job wasn't to enjoy victory. It was to protect the balance of truth. On her desk lay a letter. She picked it up and unfolded it carefully. It was written by a young girl named Zoya Fern, Rosa's daughter. Dear Judge Nalea, it read. Thank you for helping my mom. Thank you for making someone listen. I want to be like you when I grow up. The judge closed her eyes for a moment. This was why she had become a judge. Not for the power, not for the title, but for moments like this. For justice. As the courthouse emptied and the noise outside faded, the message of the trial remained strong. Truth matters. Justice is possible. And sometimes the sentence itself shakes more than the floor. It shakes the world awake.